Alright, let's talk about the champion mods for next season. Bungie recently let us know about most of the champion mods next season. They kind of hinted for Overload Sword. On top of this, we only know 4 Tier 1 champion mod stuns, and usually we have 5, so there might be one more missing. We'll see. We don't know yet for sure. But the ones we do know about are apparently Overload Sword, then we got Anti-Barrier Auto Rifle, Unstoppable Fusion and Linear Fusion, Overload Bow, Unstop Pulse, and Unstop Sidearm for some reason. Again, why? Alright, anyway, I'm going to go over recommendations and suggestions for each of these categories going into next season, kind of like maybe a top 3, top 5 kind of thing, depending on what people have or don't have, you know. So, let's start down the list. I'm going to start with my favorite, which is Overload Bow, aka the best overload stun in the game, and it's not even close. How dare you say bows are not good? And no, Divinity's not better. Stop it. Seek help. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, so let's talk about the exotic bows first. I just want to start this off by saying, yes, these are good choices. They're not bad at all. However, keep in mind that they take up an exotic slot, and that might matter depending on what other exotics might be good next season. For example, 1,000 voices, which is in a heavy slot. So, let's go over exotic bows. First, we got Trinity GHOUL. Really good bow with the catalyst, even outside of Shattered Throne. Yeah, we know who that's about. And then it's arc, so if we have Nightfalls with arc shields next season, it can come really handy. Then, let's move on to MONARQUE. I know a lot of people like this bow a lot, just in practical use in like regular strikes and such. It's a void bow. It's not bad at all. It has tick damage. Again, if there's void shields next season, which generally speaking there probably will be, it's not a bad choice, but again, it's exotic. And then we finally have a solar bow, the Tiku's Divination. I actually have fun using this bow. The problem here is, besides being exotic, it also has like a I don't even know how to explain it. Just a weird firing pattern kind of. It's a little hard to explain. It's not the easiest bow to use, though it's nothing crazy. But I will say the one positive it does have, besides the auto tracking, is it can make Warmind cells. And yes, Warmind cells are getting nerfed next season, but they won't be extinct. They'll still be very usable. Let's be honest. More than likely, you'll probably end up using Warmind cells anyway, even if they're nerfed, because everything else is nowhere near as fun or powerful. So, Tiku's is an option because it's solar. It can make Warmind cells, but again, exotic. Okay, let's talk about bows I would actually personally use and like, and why I would use them. Starting off with Kinetic. Biting Winds. It can roll Explosive Head, making it very strong already out the gate. Additional damage on targets, very helpful in GMs, even Master Nightfalls. Hell, I mean, you could use this in a raid if you want to. It's very, very strong. You can farm this at Varix on Europa as much as you want. Explosive Head is definitely the perk you want. Anything else is a plus, whatever you may prefer. And yeah, the Overload Bows next season, so it's good. You should get one for sure. Now, I currently don't own this bow because I hate gardening and it makes me fall asleep. But this is a good bow and very accessible, I guess, because it's from the first encounter initially in Garden, and it's a kinetic bow. Free up a slot for whatever you want to use in energy, so it's definitely an option. A Cure Redemption, if you happen to have one, it's usable. So there you go. Just wanted to mention that, even though I don't have one. Moving on. Alright, let's talk about the MVP of bows, in my opinion anyway. Tyranny of Heaven, the bow from Last Wish. One of the most underrated, untalked about weapons in this game. It is a solar bow from Last Wish that you can get Explosive Head on, as well as Dragonfly, by the way. Just a little tidbit there. It can create Warmind cells because of Wrath of Rasputin and combining with Rage of the Warmind, Global Reach, all that good stuff, yada yada. Even with Warmind cells getting nerfed, this will definitely be very usable, viable, very good for Overload Bow. And if you kill a champion while shooting it with this, instant Warmind cell. Very powerful. #1 bow right now, in my opinion. But there's 2 other options. Door number 2, you have Arsenic Bite, which can roll Explosive Head, Dragonfly, and even Rampage, if I remember correctly. And you can have 2 of these together, as you can see, which is really fun to use. I love this bow. I've been using it for a very long time, aside from Tyranny, or Together rather. It comes from World Drops, even Banshee, even Prime Engrams, I believe. I've gotten some from there, so it's kind of accessible, but at the same time, if you don't have a ton of Gunsmith mats, you might have a little trouble getting it. But if you happen to have one with Explosive Head, highly recommended that you use it next season. Alright, now we have probably my least favorite option, just because this bow does not roll Explosive Head, but it is a Void bow in the event that you want to use it for Void shields and don't want to use the Monarch. And it does roll Frenzy, which is kind of nice to have on a bow. Not better than Explosive Head, in my opinion, but still viable. It was accessible last season from Season of the Chosen, so we have one in your vault. It's time to dust it off and have fun with it. That's it for my bow recommendations. There's a decent list and amount of bows you can use, but there you go. Alright, let's just get the worst thing out of the way. We all know 99% of people won't use sidearms. It's just a given. There are some people out there that like sidearms, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely going to be the least used option. But hey, I'm going to put some recommendations anyway. So first up, you have a Farewell that you currently can get from Season of the Splicer. It has some good perks it can roll. As you can see on screen, it can do Frenzy, it can have Thresh, so it's not too bad. And if you like sidearms, it's definitely one of the better choices out there, but there's one more that's better, in my opinion, and that would be 7 SERAPH Sidearm. It can roll Full Auto, Vorpal, and it can make Warmind cells. By default, that, in my opinion, makes it the best sidearm in the game. However, it's not easily accessible. I think it's just a World Drop / Banshee, so... Pulse Rifles. You guys have some interesting options for sure. Obviously, there's the elephant in the room with the Messenger, especially an Adept one that can roll Adept mods, so you can put things like Adept big ones on said gun. And then you have perks like Desperado, which could be fun to use, definitely. That is your kinetic option, as well as No Time to Explain, which is pretty fun to use as well, as a pulse for a champ mod next season. However, it is a exotic, so it would take up your exotic slot. Again, depending what's good with exotics next season, particularly in the heavy slot. But those are your two best kinetic options. Obviously, there's other choices, but if you have one of these, I think that is the go-to. And for energy, we have a couple options for energy. First up, we have GRIDSKIPPER. Very good pulse. I hear a lot of good things about this. Personally, I have used it a limited amount of time, but I see it gaining a lot of popularity from other people in the community. It can roll good perks. It's farmable. It has Frenzy. It's Void, so if Void shields come up, very good choice. And that's what I would recommend. And for Solar and Arc, we've got, first up, Third Axiom. It is a Vanguard weapon drop from the Strikes playlist. It is Arc for Arc shields. It can roll Vorpal, and it can roll Feeding Frenzy, among other things. Good option to have if you happen to have one in your vault. Hold on to it. If not, try to get it and keep one from Strikes from between now until next season. And then you also have Stars and Shadows, which used to drop on Crucible. I think it still does, actually. Very good pulse. I actually used this quite a bit when it first came out. Very fun to use. Nice and snappy. Rolls Vorpal and other things. And it is solar, so it covers the third and final shield for you to worry about. Also, one small note to know. If we get Corrupted next season, which I think is a possibility for it to finally come back, they might re-release Horror's Least, considering a lot of people still want this gun, and, you know, the whole unsunsetting thing happened, which is kind of awkward. I imagine this would be a nutty pulse to use going into the future, should they re-wave it, reissue it, whatever. So, just something to keep in mind with pulses being a thing next season. That's it for Pulse. Let's go to autos. Alright, so for autos, we have some nice choices actually going into next season. First up, we got Chroma Rush that you can currently farm in Override and other activities during Season of Splicer. It can roll really good perks, Subsistence among them. You have Rampage, you have Kill Clip, you have Dynamic Sway, tap the trigger, whatever you may prefer. Very good gun. I enjoy using it this season. I know a lot of other people also did. Definitely comes in handy, so if you have one, keep it for next season. Definitely a solid choice for Kinetic. Also, another contender would be a 7 SERAPH Carbine if you happen to have one in your vault. The main thing for this, honestly, is it can make Warmind cells. That's a key going forward. Even with cells being nerfed, they will still be used, and this might be a very real option to use in content like Nightfalls. So that's just a suggestion for this if you have one. Moving on. Finally, we have Tiger Spite, which recently got reissued into the Dreaming City. it can actually roll some really nice perks, such as you see on screen. We got Frenzy, Surplus, High Cal. I actually am going to try this out and see how it works. Hopefully it works out, because this gun needed some love for a very long time. That's my kinetic suggestions. Let's go to energy. First up, we got the Summoner. Currently can't get it in the game, but I imagine a lot of people will have acquired this at some point from the past trial season and kept it in their vault. It can roll Overflow, it can roll Rampage, Dragonfly. Like, it's just a really nice auto rifle to use. So, if you happen to have one in your vault, just chilling, waiting for it to get used, definitely recommend that you pop in and out next season. It comes in really handy for solar. Arc Logic recently got reissued on the moon, and, you know, most of the guns that got reissued on the moon are trash now, to be honest, completely, but Arc Logic can actually roll some decent stuff. It has Frenzy. I believe it also rolls Feeding Frenzy, among other things. But I think Frenzy is the best perk this gun can get, and it's very farmable with the fragments on the moon. So if you don't have one already, I suggest you go get it. It's also a nice arc weapon to have, unless you have Shadow Price. I didn't think I'd be talking about this, but here we are. Shadow Price, that has been available in GM since last season, can roll some nasty perks, which, I mean, basically you see on screen is a god roll. It can roll other things as well for people that don't like things like Disruption Break, but Disruption Break and Overflow, or even 4 times to Charm, go hand in hand together. Really nice. It has insane range, as you can see, and it breaks arc shields. On top of that, you can also put on Adept big ones on it, or whatever mod you want, including other Adept mods. Super solid. Definitely going to get used next season, and that's my recommendations for auto. Let's go to swords. Alright, let's cover swords. I'm sure some of these are no-brainers to people, but I'm still going to mention them anyway. So before we start, I just want to say I'm not going to mention class-specific swords just because, well, they're class-specific. So I'm not going to be like, if you're a hunter, use Quick Fang, you know? So no Quick Fang, Eternity's Edge, Crown Splitter. You can use those by any means if you want. I'm just not going to mention them because they're not universal. So first off, Black Talon. Actually pretty good in some cases. For example, you can run these in like Master Law sectors where the burn is void. Really helpful. Ranged overload stun. It tracks. So just wanted to mention that. And then of course the other exotic option you have is Lament. I don't think much needs to be said about Lament, though I will mention that you can't use anti-barrier and overload on this sword. So just keep that in mind. You can use it for sorry, not overload, anti-barrier stuns, but it would not proc an overload stun. Just wanted to mention that so people know. Some people don't, some people do. So there you have it. Next up, legendary swords. We're gonna start with my boy Bequest. If you don't know why this sword is godly, check out the Bequest video I made on the channel. It is extremely underrated, very fun, very good sword. Has the second highest impact in the game, only the Crown Splitter, which is by 2 points, but Crown Splitter hits at the speed of a snail. So Bequest, I think, is actually a better choice, and obviously is not tied to Titans. It's also arc. It can roll Surrounded and Thresh and give you super insanely fast, as you can see in my Bequest video. And if you have one, highly recommend it. If you don't, go beat up Tanix a little bit more. Next up, let's just get out of the way. Everybody knows Falling Guillotine is meta. It is a staple. Most people still have it in their inventory right now, chilling, waiting, or using it. It can roll nutty perks, Whirlwind, Relentless, Boss Spec, Major Spec, etc., etc. Everybody knows about this. Dart Drinker 2.0. Let's move on. Next up is SOLA'S Adept from Trials. Now you can use the regular version as well, or the Adept version. I imagine not a ton of people have this sword, given people probably just want hammers and messengers. But if some people did go after this or got it and got a good roll, and have it on your vault, it is very solid. It can roll Vorpal as well as being able to use Adept mod. So again, Adept big ones comes in handy on this sword. It's also solar and ranged, and it comes in handy again for things like Master Law sectors, Nightfalls. Very useful. But if you don't have it and you want a solar legendary option, you also have Negative Space. This is a sword that you get from the Prophecy dungeon in the cube encounter, so it's farmable, and it can roll Surrounded with Relentless, among other things. Very good sword. This one is not long range, so it's not a projectile, it's a regular sword. Still very good to use for a solar option. And those are my sword recommendations overall. I'm sure there's other options to tell, but let's move on to the final option, that we know of. Fusion rifles. So fusion rifles have a bunch of things to play with next season. I'm not even sure what will be exactly meta. It's going to be fun trying to find out what's what procs, what the buffs are, and all that to fusion rifles. But I'm just going to go over a list of things you might want to look for or get and just take out of your vault. So let's start at the top. We have Arbalist. Break shields, has a disruption break, linear fusion rifle, exotic, kinetic slot. That's pretty much all there is to mention about it. And then we have, where is it? I hate this weapon, but Bastion. Yep. That's all I gotta say. If I remember correctly, this has a built-in unstoppable, so yep, that's it. It's not a terrible gun. I hate it in PvP, that's all. Moving on. And then in the energy slots for exotics, we've got Merciless, which actually has seen some meta play here and there based on how the gun works. It could be viable next season. We'll see. Again, time will tell. Time will tell. It's also a solar option. Then we got Telesto. Telesto's the best, though. It breaks the game every season. So I'm sure it'll find a way to break the game again this season. Great void option. Fun vacuum gun to use. Let's go with that. And then we got everybody's favorite toaster oven. I think this is going to be fun next season to use. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it's going to be 100% meta or anything, but I'm looking forward to just nuking people with toast in PvE. Another solar option. Then we got everyone's favorite, but not really, at least not in D2, Vex MYTHOCLASTO, which is actually considered a fusion rifle. Somehow people missed that part for this. It's also getting buffed next season. Not sure what the buff is yet, but it could be good depending on what it is. And it has a full auto mode, or I guess like a Queenbreaker beam mode, as well as just being a regular, almost kind of like a weird pulse rifle gun. So that'll be interesting to see how it interacts with unstops and whatnot. It could be a sleeper pick, just worth noting. For once, I actually have the raid exotic ready for a season where it could be good. It's a miracle. It's not Eyes of Tomorrow all over again. Alright, moving on. For legendaries, you have things like Plug 1 with Reservoir Burst. This has been out all season. If you haven't got a Reservoir Burst Plug 1, you should definitely get it before it's gone. Unfortunately, I do not think it's going to be back in rotation for the rest of the season, unless next week is all 3 weapons, which is a possibility. So I'm just going to mention that in case it is, but most likely it's going to be Sniper next week. But here's hoping it's all 3. Also, good arc option. Forgot to mention that. Moving on. Just kidding, not moving on. One last thing. It obviously can also use ADEPT mods, which, like ADEPT big ones, comes in handy for PvE. Okay, now we're moving on, I promise. Null Composure is the ritual pinnacle weapon this season? I don't know what word Bungie uses. They always change it like every season. This is the weapon you were able to get from Banshee this season. Definitely should pick up /finish if you haven't already. Very good to use as Reservoir Burst, and the whole switch perks go high impact reserves, do more damage. Weird thing. So definitely worth using, and it's a void option. So there you go. Then we got a couple of sleeper picks. We have EXILE'S Curse, which is like the worst Trials weapon ever made, quite possibly. But hey, it could finally maybe potentially shine, because it has high impact reserves, among other things, and it can use ADEPT big ones, and is another arc option in case you didn't get a Plug 1 this season. And finally, one last sleeper perk. For energy, at least, fusion rifles, a legendary solar fusion rifle, Cartesian coordinate, which can roll Vorpal, so it's a kind of a last-ditch option if you can't get any other weapons mentioned because of, you know, radar RNG or trials, GM RNG. So there you have it. You have a good chunk of options, exotic and legendary, for fusion rifles in the legendary slot. And let's go to heavy. So for heavy, you obviously have the elephant in the room. Sleeper, of course, is going to be a top option for next season. If people are already saying sleeper this, sleeper that, sleeper, I really do hope sleeper is good next season. I'm not gonna lie, this weapon has been dogged so many times for apparently no reason. I don't know why, and hopefully it's gonna have its time to shine. I'd prefer it, you know, shoot out Warmind balls instead of a laser beam, but hey, baby steps, I'll take it. Then we got the interesting decision or choice of 1K voices. It'll be interesting to see how it interacts with unstops, given the way the gun shoots. You know, will the initial burst tickle the unstop immediately, and then the rest of the burst just do full damage? Maybe we'll get that catalyst that has been rumored for 1,300 years by now. And yeah, solar option in the heavy slot could do good damage. Could get a nice fat buff, you know. We'll see. It depends. Could be usable. And then finally, we have probably the best option you could use in terms of using a linear or fusion in Threaded Needle, which is from Season of the Chosen. You can still get this in the Helm to this day. It can roll really nice perks. It has Vorpal, Clown Cartridge, you can get Fuel Prep, it can get Autoloading. So, really viable. Void option. I think this is going to be quote-unquote meta, outside of the usual trends of, hey, just use Izanagi, Divinity, blah, 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 blah. So, these are my recommends / suggestions. Let me know what you guys think, or you have any suggestions of your own for whatever reason. Leave them in the comments. Be sure to like and a sub if you enjoyed this video or it helped you prepare. Also, catch my streams at twitch.tv/sneakybeaver. Stream daily. Later!